Welcome to Innovate Fort Worth, the podcast where we highlight local innovation and the people bringing those innovations to market. I'm Cameron Cushman, and this episode is one of 4 special editions of Innovate Fort Worth that we will also be showing for Global Entrepreneurship Week Fort Worth. So before we begin today's interview, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Global Entrepreneurship Week. GEW Fort Worth is a week-long set of events, activities, and competitions each November that inspires millions of people globally to explore their potential as an entrepreneur while fostering connections and increasing collaborations within their own ecosystems. Over 40,000 GEW events will be celebrated in 180 countries in this week around the world. And Fort Worth will host its own celebration with over 50 events, all completely virtual, that cover a wide variety of helpful topics for entrepreneurs. So be sure and tune in at gewfortworth.com. On today's episode, we have Tamara Payne, the founder and CEO of Ensemble Co-working. She's also a marketing strategist of Payne Free Marketing, a business coach, and an entrepreneurial community builder. She was also awarded the Fort Worth Inc. magazine's 2018 Entrepreneur of Excellence Award and in the Supporter of Entrepreneurship category. Tamara is also a big contributor to the Fort Worth entrepreneurial ecosystem and has hosted events in her space at Ensemble Co-working for Global Entrepreneurship Week, the Fort Worth Startup Crawl, and 1 Million Cups in her space. Tamara, welcome to Innovate Fort Worth.
Thank you, Cameron. That was a great intro.
Well, thanks.
Wonderful.
First time on video, so we're going here. So I'd like to start with how you got to Fort Worth. I know you weren't born and raised here,
No.
but how did you get to Fort Worth?
Well, I keep telling people, I'm like, you know the saying, I wasn't born here, but I got here as quickly as I could. So when I was 20 years old, I moved to East Texas to go to school at East Texas State University, which is now Texas A&M Commerce. And I had been in a junior college and working full-time up north where I grew up. But I really wanted an experience and an adventure, and boy, did I get one. You know, I remember taking a bus from Dallas to Greenville, and in Greenville, I switched from that bus to a van, like a cargo, and took the van into Commerce. Now, growing up in New Jersey, I lived 25 minutes from New York City, 25 minutes from New York State. So when I showed up in Commerce in this van, and they pull up, and it's like a one-room building. It's 6 a.m, nobody's there, and the bus driver says, I can lock your luggage inside and leave you here until someone can come get you. And I was like, well, who's gonna come get me? Well, there is a taxi in town, but they weren't open yet. So it was quite an experience, but it was lovely. Commerce is such a quaint little town. I walked around, found a bakery was open, former pastor and his wife brought me in, fed me some breakfast until I could take the station wagon taxi to my dorm room.
Wow, what a welcome to Texas experience. That's amazing.
But look, I knew when I moved here, if I loved it, I was gonna stay. In my junior year, I met my husband who actually lived in Fort Worth at the time, and he's a firefighter, and he would come visit me out there. And we got married in 95, and I've been here since. My family's here now. My mom moved here prior to her passing 5 years ago. My brother lived in Flower Mound. My sister lives in Burleson. I have another sister now in South Lake. I had another sister that lived here at one point. So they just kind of followed me.
So you got deep roots. They just didn't start here, huh?
That's right. And I now have lived here longer than I lived in New Jersey, which gives away my age.
Very good.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, you're not supposed to ask a woman about her age, so I'll leave that.
I'll
leave that one there.
I'm proud to be the age that I am.
So tell me a little bit about your background before you jumped into establishing a co-working space. You were a broadcast journalist and worked in TV, correct?
Yeah.
Is that where you started your career?
It is. I mean, well, I've always dabbled in little entrepreneurial things. I've had crafting businesses. I was a Mary Kay consultant, but I went to school for communications and radio television. And so I interned at NBC5 here in Fort Worth when I was in my senior year, and got offered a job, started off there as an assignments editor and associate producer, so I was a writer. From there, I moved to Channel 11, so CBS here, and worked there, same thing as an assignments editor and a writer. And along that way, I did do some on-air stuff and did go on some stories, but it was kind of, you have to work your way up. I was young still. And after Channel 11, I don't know, there was just something, I loved the writing part of it. And I wasn't sure that this was exactly where I wanted to be. So I went into marketing. I left TV, went into marketing, started writing, this was at the beginning of the internet and learning how to build websites. So I taught myself how to build websites, taught myself how to do all this stuff for a couple of companies that I worked for. I was freelancing for Channel 11 though, so I was still in the business on the weekends. And a couple years into in marketing, I had an offer from Channel 4 to come back and work for them. So I actually was working in their Fort Worth office as their assignments manager now, and still did some writing. And but then I had a couple of years of a difficult pregnancy and had miscarried twice, and I was trying to get pregnant, and I knew that if I was going to do this once and for all, I needed to not have any stress. And I'll tell you, working in television news is stressful. So I quit working at Fox in '99, and I got pregnant 2 months later, and I have twin daughters today that are almost 20, they're 20, and so it was the right decision. And I knew after I had the girls, because I had a difficult pregnancy, that I did not want to go back to work for anybody. I wanted to be able to raise my girls. And so when they were 4 months old, as I pretty much do everything, I decided, well, let's go ahead and start a business, babe. Let's do this. And so my husband and I started researching businesses, and because I did marketing and graphic design. And so we said, well, let's go ahead and do promotional products and print brokering. So I could create the graphics. And so my husband and I started that business together, and we worked it together for about 5 years. We bought screen printing equipment, we did t-shirts, as well as brokering and creating all this stuff. But I also did a lot of consulting. I did a lot of working with people on what their marketing message is and things like that. And so about 4 years later, I really, the love was working in the consulting side of it, and that in the messaging, and you really can't put a big message on a pen. So I moved away from selling products and just did consulting and marketing. And that's really where I found my niche, so to speak. Yeah.
That's great. So that led into you and your co-founder, Dawn Shannon, founding what I believe was the first women-owned co-working space, definitely in Fort Worth, maybe Tarrant County. Was it also the whole DFW area?
It was North Texas, yeah.
Wow.
At the time when we launched, which was April 2016, which is hard to believe that we're going to come up on 5 years now, that we were the first woman-owned co-working space in North Texas. And I'm proud to say that, but I'm even more proud now to be joined by so many other amazing women who own co-working spaces in North Texas, as well as Texas as a whole. There's a lot of them that are owned, and then of course across the United States. But yeah, it is typically a male-dominated industry from an owner's standpoint, because they'll go at it from a real estate perspective, but then your community managers who are running the spaces tend to be women. Ironically, it turned out being the other way around, because I have a male community manager, which was not intended, but he just was the absolute right guy for it. And you know Clint, I mean, so he is amazing.
He's pretty awesome. Yep,
yeah.
No doubt about it.
So Dawn and I started the business in 2016, and she was working full-time still at her job. I had already been an entrepreneur and on my own, so it's easier for me because I had my husband's salary and I could take that risk. It was a little bit easier. She's a single mom, needed to stay working at her job she'd been with for 13 or 14 years, and she had already recently received her certified professional coach license. She'd been doing a little bit of that on the side. So about a year and a half, 12, 14 months later, she left her job and came to work in the business with me full time. And I think that's when it really kind of hit her how much work that was, being inside the business. And so we spent the next year working together, figuring out what our roles are, which is like on paper, we had it all on paper, but once you work into a business together with your business partner and you don't have someone who's just the behind the scenes and you're there together, then it's this trying to figure out who does what, and because of who does it better or is more skilled at it probably and more comfortable doing it. And we did a little bit of this jockeying, trying to figure out who goes best where, which is normal. And we found a stride, but there still was something that wasn't fitting for Dawn. And ultimately, you know, we had so many discussions about this, and about, you know, where are we going as a company, where are we going personally and individually. And one day I just said to her, I looked her in the eye because we're really good friends, and I said, you know, it would be okay if you want to leave. It would be all right.
Very good.
Yeah.
So I've been to a lot of co-working spaces, and they tend to be these kind of more sterile environments, a lot of hard surfaces, a lot of glass, a lot of windows, things like that, but not rugs and carpet and things like that.
Mm.
When I walked into Ensemble, I got the exact opposite feeling.
Mm-hmm.
You get this kind of warm, cozy living room feeling, like it's a place you'd want to hang out, like it was in your house.
Right.
Tell me about how you guys kind of thought through the design of what the space should look like, and then maybe what kind of feedback have you gotten from your members, from your clients, or other people who've used the space?
Sure. I appreciate that, by the way, because that is exactly the feeling that we were going for. So I had been in, prior to opening Ensemble, I had done research and traveled the United States and even Canada, and I'd probably been in about 30 different spaces. Everything from that super corporate industrial look right down to very small, maybe one room, 2,000 square feet kind of space. That was it. Down in Florida and in Mississippi, I was in one that was like that. And ultimately what it boiled down to is, for me as an entrepreneur who worked from home for years, then I had an office when I was in Burleson. I had an office to the point to where it got to be too much money and expensive, nearly bankrupted myself because I got in over my head with the expenses. But I spent most of my time at home, right? Where do we feel most comfortable? In our own homes. So my theory was, if someone was gonna pay me to actually use my workspace, right, versus me paying you to come to work, right, then it's gotta be a place where they feel comfortable. And what I wanted to create was a place where people could feel connected to one another. And I do believe that the environment is a part of that, right? The environment lends to that collaborative feel that we have inside Ensemble, to that comfortableness that people have with talking about vulnerable things as an entrepreneur, or asking for help from one another when they maybe have only had a few words of a discussion once in a while. So I wanted it to be a place that felt homey, felt cozy, people felt comfortable. So I say it's your home office away from home, right? Because it's still professional. It still has a great vibe in that sense, but it definitely has a different feel. And listen, we're not for everybody. Some people love that other, and I think that was a part of it as well, was wanting to make sure that I provide something that's different than what is in the marketplace, right? That if I ultimately my goal was the three words that we live and die by at Ensemble, which is connections, collaboration, and community. If I was going to do that, then the space had to create that environment.
That makes sense, and I think it also goes to the name and kind of the theme. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about how you named the company, named the co-working space Ensemble, and then how that carried through to the other aspects of the space.
Sure. And again, to go back to being a business partner, Dawn and I had to come to these agreements together, and we initially tried to combine our kids' names, and we tried to combine our love of certain things, and it just wasn't fitting right. And ironically, we went to this craft show together where a friend of ours was displaying, and we were walking through the booths, and this lady had taken, it was literally sitting on a table like this. There was a box, and then there was all this weird stuff that you would never put together on top of this box, all glued, but it was beautiful. And I said, well, what is that? And she said, an assemblage. And I thought she said ensemblage, right? And I took French, but I keep saying ensemble. A lot of people say ensemble, but I took French, so I say ensemble. And I said an assemblage, and I kept looking at this, and part of it, at that point, everything was about trying to find the right name. And I said, wow, look at that. That's the combining of all of these different pieces of things that you would never think go together to make something beautiful. And I turned around and I looked at her and said, ensemble. What about ensemble? Because see, music was part of it, because her son played trumpet in the band. So music, she wanted something musical. And so my mind was always on that. Like, how do we bring that into this? And what's an ensemble when you think of music, right? It's all these instruments coming together to make something beautiful. That if they play alone, they're pretty good, but when they play together, it's pretty amazing. And it was that moment we said ensemble, and yeah. And then it took us a little bit with the collaborative business community part of it to come up with the secondary part of the name. But we walked away that day and we both felt really, really good about it, because, and I still to this day love saying it, that this is a combination of people who honestly would have never known each other, who come from all these different walks of life. Some of them are not even entrepreneurs. We have a lot of remote workers who work for corporations who have expertises in things that none of us have, which is super. And now we all come together and we make up this really cool community. Kind of like our ongoing joke about our ecosystem builders, that we're this unique group of misfits coming together with one cause, right? So I feel like it's that. It's like this unique group of people that, and it's always changing. People are coming and going, and every time someone different comes or goes, it changes the shapes and the dynamics of it all, but it works. It really, really works.
Well, like an ensemble, you have to play together, right?
Yeah.
You have to all work in concert with each other, or it's going to sound horrible.
Yep.
So, I love that. I always love how people name their companies,
Yeah.
and that's always fascinating to me. So, Tamara, one of the things you already kind of touched on is you have a heart for Fort Worth. You have a heart for entrepreneurs. You have a heart for the DFW area. You have a heart for our community, and you have taken your gifts, your time, your talents, and you have poured them into the entrepreneurial community. You've jumped in with us on crazy things like startup crawls. You hosted 1 million cups for an entire year, I believe.
15
maybe
months.
more.
15 months, yeah.
At your space. You've definitely been a great advocate for entrepreneurs, and you've been a huge advocate for Global Entrepreneurship Week since the beginning. Since we had this crazy idea in 2018 that we should bring this to Fort Worth. So tell me about your involvement in the entrepreneurial community. What do you love about it, and how does your role at Ensemble kind of play into this broader community?
Well, I think Ensemble has provided me with great opportunities to get in there and be a part of this. So I have to, be grateful that there are things that you do that open doors to other things. And I always feel like that's a part of it for me. Is I always feel like whatever I do now is going to open me to something new, and I have to be open to that. But I'm passionate about entrepreneurs because I am one, right? I've been through this multiple times. I have multiple businesses. I've had some I've let go and some I still have. And the thing all along the way for me was about having mentors and having people that I could talk to. And there were times where it was like radio silence for years, and I felt very siloed, and it was difficult, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I lost money, and I didn't have the right advisors that I ended up paying for. And so part of opening Ensemble was about being able to provide a space that allows for people to connect to the resources that they need. So I always say I'm a huge connector. I've been running leads groups since 2002, and networking groups even for major organizations is about resources. So being a part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Fort Worth is about resources. How do I continue to help these people connect to the things that they need? Because I don't have it all, and I can't be it all for everybody. And I think that's key thing. No one of us can be everything for everybody.
That's exactly right. So you kind of touched on this a little bit, but from your vantage point as working with a ton of different businesses from across not only your own businesses, but also hosting these businesses at Ensemble, what do you see are some of the biggest obstacles to entrepreneurship and the building of the ecosystem here in Fort Worth?
I think it's still about communication and knowledge. Like, they don't know that it's there. It's always like a secret in many ways. So we're doing really with Sparkyard is doing really well and trying to get that word out there. But that's, again, a part of being a part of the ecosystem, is making sure that I communicate these things to everybody, that you've got this opportunity, this opportunity, this opportunity. So there's an assumption that everybody can get on the internet and go look for everything they want to find. But guess what? Googling is not, everybody's best skill. And then if you don't know what to put in, you don't necessarily find what you need. So I feel like it's them knowing about it. And that's where you and I and these other organizations come into play. The more mouthpieces we have out there to say, hey, did you know about SCORE? Did you know about the Small Business Development Center? Did you know about 1 Million Cups? Get connected, bring them in. So I think we've just got to keep talking about it. The other aspect of it I also find is money. That's probably the next hardest thing, is getting access to capital and on a smaller scale. So as someone who talked with multiple potential investors as well as a couple of venture capital groups prior to opening Ensemble, I know how hard it is. I mean, and it was no. And I thank God that we ended up being able to do this on our own anyway, but I just don't think there's enough organizations out there willing to say, hey, let's do this small entrepreneur and give them 10 grand to get them off the ground, right? Let's help them get there. Not, I need $1 million. People who have the money to invest and are not looking for this massive turnaround of money, but are willing to say, I see you and I'm willing to take a risk with you. So Tarrant County College recently combined with another organization, and I'm going to mess this up. So it's the EEVF fund, and I'm on their committee now to help distribute these funds. And the whole purpose of this, which I'm going to put this out on Ensemble's page in a little bit, but the whole purpose of this is to be able to help the everyday entrepreneur with $3,000 to $8,000 to help get them launched. Just right? You can start a popsicle stand with $3,000 to $8,000, right? So I think that's what we need more of. There's tons of people willing to give money to these big tech companies and these people who are creating much needed innovative things. But remember, the backs of the community are on small businesses. That's what makes a city what it is. So let's help them get off the ground and make it to the next step.
Preach it. I love it. That's awesome. No, and I think you're exactly right. And more entrepreneurship, more people starting companies is always a good thing. Right?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to shift a second to your latest endeavor, which is a potential entrance into public life as an elected official. So full disclosure, we are recording this episode in advance of the election. But Tamara, you have decided to run for the Burleson City Council. So we can't announce the results because the election day hadn't happened yet. Right. We'll update everybody on social media and when we actually publish this. But for now, just give us the background. Like, why did you decide to run for office? What do you hope to achieve? Give us your platform. Give us your talking points. Like, why are you doing this? You've got a very successful business or businesses, but you've chosen a public service path potentially. So tell us about that.
Well, I think that speaks to the fact that I'm a servant leader. Right off the bat, a lot of what we've already been talking about, and is that I love to serve people, and I love to make a difference in people's lives. I believe my mission in life is to affect change in the lives of people, and if I can affect change on a larger scale, then I should do that. Ironically, it was a friend of mine who is an executive coach. We were talking at the beginning of this year, prior to all of the pandemic and stuff, and talking about, well, what are your plans for the new year with your business? And I always end up talking about Ensemble, and then I always get the question about my business consulting and marketing consulting business, and that's always my secondary because I've got a brick and mortar business to run. But she said, so I kind of talk about it a little bit, and she looks at me dead serious and goes, I think you were meant for more. You need to think bigger and dream bigger. And isn't that what you and I do to everybody else, right? We try to help them dream and see bigger, and I often fail to do that for myself. And it really stuck with me. And that's all she said. It's all she said. And it stuck with me, and because she's such that good a friend that I thought, my friends see me for more than what I see myself, right? And for whatever reason, I started praying about this and thought, what does that mean? And a couple of years ago, I had a lovely woman named Vanessa Adia rent our largest office, who ran against Kay Bailey Hutchinson.
No, Kay Granger,
Kay Granger,
12,
thank
right?
you.
Yes,
yes,
we have
sorry.
Too many Ks.
I knew Kay Granger. And 2 years they were in my space, and I watched this campaign from the very early, where they weren't that heavy into it, to the very, very heavy. We were holding, watch parties and all this stuff, and we had, people coming in and out of the space. And I can remember the passion that she had for what she believed in, right? And it just, one day, it like all came together, what my friend said in that, and I said to my husband, I said, well, what if I run for office? And he looked at me like, what? He really, you're married to me, you're gonna go, what's the next crazy idea, okay? And no, I said, I think so. I think really, and as I started looking into, and I've been aware of the things going on in my city, but you start looking deeper into it, and then you go, okay, I think we really need this now. And for me, a big part of my platform is about business and small business. And then ironically, the pandemic hit, because I filed on February 14th, and then the pandemic hit, and then we go into lockdown, and then small business in a town like Burleson is huge.
Yeah.
And I'm watching friends down there get hit and hurt, as well as the ones in my own space and our friends up here in Fort Worth. And so for me, I feel like we we weren't really pushing small business enough in Burleson and bringing them together. And now the Economic Development Department is really heavy into helping small business down there, which we've seen it here in Fort Worth as well, right? With the grants that they're doing. So it was all very ironic timing, because now small business has been elevated. So I want to create a small business council down there that will bring in the chamber down there, as well as the small business community, and bring in our voices. And I'd love to take a lot of what we've been doing here and bring it down there. I have lots of conversations with the chamber down there. I'm friends with the president. I've been in the chamber off and on for 20 years. And so I think the things I'm involved in Fort Worth are going to be extremely helpful down there on a city level. And I say, because I see all the city stuff going on up here. So for me, it's a lot of the same platform you'll see from other people who want to make a difference in their cities on a city council level is safety. Public safety is very important to me. My husband's a firefighter, and with firefighters and police, making sure as our city is growing so exponentially that we have enough of them and they're trained well. Of course, fiscal responsibility, term limits is a big thing in my town, because we have people who've been on council for 12, 15, 22 years, and we've kind of need new, innovative ideas. I believe the thing about it is that I've been block walking, and I have met so many people, and I'm thrilled with how many people are actually know what's going on and are paying attention. And I'm like, well, why aren't you involved? They're like, well, it's scary. Yeah. Very scary.
Sure.
We went to dinner that night because it was Valentine's Day, and I sat there, and we were at Mi Familia in Fort Worth, and I said, did I just do that? And I still think that. And so I voted for myself last week, and I went, wow, that was weird. So to me, I feel like this is just a larger scale of making a difference for a larger group of people, using the knowledge that I have and trying to make a difference.
Outstanding. Well, best of luck to you next week.
Thank
we'll be
you.
sure and update our listeners as to how
yeah.
the results turn out. You'll make a fantastic city councilwoman, no doubt about
it.
So the question we always ask on Innovate Fort Worth is, who is your favorite innovator in Fort Worth?
There's not one person that I can think of. I'm going to put them into this group, and it's the women in business in Fort Worth. It's been for the last, I've always been a huge proponent for women in business. And I see so much of it in my space as well. But then as I've watched over the last 6-7 months throughout the pandemic, and I've watched these women business owners collaborate on projects and work together and come up with innovative ideas on how to help keep each other afloat, that I admire them so much. Danette Wicker owns Danette's Urban Oasis here in Fort Worth. That woman has continued to pivot and innovate over the last 7 months that I'm just like, I'm impressed. So for me, I look at the women in business and the women entrepreneurs of today, that they are innovators and they are innovating together, which is even better.
Very cool. Well, Tamara, thank you so much for joining us today on Innovate Fort Worth and sharing your story with us. Again, best of luck in the upcoming election. If you want to learn more about Tamara Payne or about Ensemble Co-working, check out Ensemble at ensemblecoworking.com. You can also find Tamara at GEW Global Entrepreneurship Week this week. Check out her events and all the other wonderful events that are happening this week at gewfortworth.com. That's gewfortworth.com. If you like learning about innovation in Fort Worth, please subscribe to the Innovate Fort Worth podcast. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Please rate us and give us a review. It means a lot. If you want to join the conversation, please follow us on social media at HSC Innovates. That's at HSC Innovates. Today's episode was produced by Kendall Rogers and Alex Branch. Our technical producer is Rob Upchurch, and our digital editor is Matt Havlick. Innovate Fort Worth is brought to you by UNT Health Science Center, where we are driven to improve the human condition through a passion for innovation and teamwork.